Everyone has a reason for why Bitcoin is lagging right now. People point at Saylor, the forced selling, the ETF flows, and sure, those things matter. But there's something much bigger going on that nobody's talking about, and the market has already started reacting to it. On January 16th, Jefferies strategist Chris Wood, who runs Greed and Fear, which is one of the most followed institutional strategy letters in the world, removed his entire Bitcoin position. That position represented 10% of his portfolio, and he moved it all into gold because of concerns about quantum computing. In today's video, we're going to break down exactly what's happening here, why institutions are suddenly thinking about quantum risk, and what that means if you hold Bitcoin. So here's what's happening that nobody on crypto Twitter is really talking about. BlackRock added quantum computing to their Bitcoin ETF risk disclosures. VanEck CEO came out and said that they would walk away from Bitcoin entirely if the thesis breaks because of quantum. Citi published a full institutional report on this, and Coinbase's institutional team is warning their clients about it. These aren't small voices. These are the same institutions that just spent 2 years fighting to get Bitcoin ETFs approved, and they're all flagging the same risk. The retail ignores this because it sounds too technical. It feels like it's far off and it's hard to model. But here's the thing that Chris Wood understands that most people don't. Bitcoin doesn't need to break for the market to discount it. The possibility alone affects how institutions value it, and that's just how institutional money thinks about risk. So to understand why institutions are reacting this way, it helps to understand how quickly the quantum timeline has shifted. Quantum computing, as a concept, has been around since the 1980s. It was all theoretical physics stuff like superposition and entanglement, things that sounded like science fiction. Then in 1994, a mathematician named Peter Shor proved something really important. He showed that a quantum computer could factor large numbers exponentially faster than any normal computer. This matters because that's exactly what breaks modern encryption like RSA and ECDSA, which are the same things that secure the internet and Bitcoin. But for decades, it still didn't matter because building an actual quantum computer was impossibly hard. The machines were noisy and unstable, and they'd basically break if you looked at them wrong. The timeline was always described as decades away. Bitcoin launched in 2009, right in the middle of this era. Satoshi used elliptic curve cryptography because it was considered unbreakable for the foreseeable future, which was a totally reasonable assumption at the time. Because in late 2024, Google announced the Willow chip, a quantum processor that solved a benchmark problem in under 5 minutes that would take classical supercomputers 10 septillion years to solve. And at that point, it became pretty clear that we're not in the theoretical era anymore. This is when the timeline really shifted. In January 2025, Jensen Huang, CEO of Nvidia, said practical quantum was 15 to 30 years away. By March, he admitted he was wrong. By June, he was calling it an inflection point, and by October, Nvidia announced that they're integrating quantum processors into every future supercomputer. That's a complete reversal in under 10 months from the guy running the most important chip company on the planet. The capital flows reflect that same urgency. China is spending around 15 billion, US at 8 billion, Japan another 8 billion, UK 5 billion. Total global commitments sit around 55 billion, with China alone spending about twice what the US is spending. This is being treated as a matter of national security. The timelines from experts are converging too, and these aren't random people. McKinsey, one of the largest consulting firms in the world, says 2 to 10 years. The US Department of Defense, the people responsible for national security planning, says possibly 3 years. Vitalik Buterin, co-founder of Ethereum, says before the next US election. And Scott Aronson, one of the top quantum physicists in the world, calls it a live possibility that we have a fault-tolerant quantum computer before November 2028. These are independent sources using completely different methods, and they're all converging on the same time window. The early end of that, institutions are already planning for it. So let me explain exactly how quantum threatens Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses something called ECDSA to secure your transactions, which is elliptic curve cryptography. The way it works is your private key signs transactions and your public key verifies them. The security assumption is that nobody can reverse your private key from your public key, because with normal computers that would take trillions of years. Functionally impossible. A quantum computer running Shor's algorithm changes that math completely. We're talking about hours or days instead of trillions of years. The part that most people miss is that when you spend Bitcoin, your public key gets exposed on the blockchain and it stays there forever. So attackers can collect exposed public keys today and then crack them later once quantum hardware is ready. This is called harvest now, decrypt later, and it's already happening in other sectors. The research on how much Bitcoin is exposed is pretty consistent across sources. Coinbase says 6.51 million, which is 32.7% of Bitcoin supply. City Labs confirms this and says it's roughly 25%, and also Delphi Digital believes it's around 6.65 million. All of these estimates cluster around the same conclusion. Roughly 1/3 of all Bitcoin is potentially vulnerable. At current prices, that's over $600 billion sitting in wallets that could be drained. And then there's the Satoshi problem. About 1.1 million Bitcoin are in the Satoshi era wallets that use old address formats with exposed public keys. These coins can't be moved to quantum safe addresses because nobody has the keys. If quantum cracks these wallets first, whoever gets there potentially takes them. That's potentially over $100 billion that could hit the market with no coordination and no defense. So the reason this matters for price comes down to how institutional money thinks about risk. Chris Wood didn't sell because quantum broke Bitcoin. It hasn't happened yet. He sold because quantum potentially breaks Bitcoin in the future, and that's being priced in real time. That distinction is really important because investors price in tail risks before they actually materialize. That's how markets work. Bitcoin needs cryptographic security to hold value for multiple decades. Quantum only needs one breakthrough to shake confidence. And institutions price in that risk today, not when it actually happens. That's how institutional money thinks. This is also why the gold comparison matters so much. Bitcoin positions itself as digital gold, but gold has no technological risk, no attack surface, and no governance friction. It just exists and doesn't need software updates. For allocators with multi-decade time horizons, this difference is significant. Nick Carter made this point on his podcast. Bitcoin Core's preparedness is low relative to the scale of capital at stake. We're talking about a $2 trillion asset with unresolved survivability risk, and institutions are pricing that right now rather than waiting for a crisis. This is one of the main reasons why Bitcoin has been underperforming gold. It's not that institutions don't understand Bitcoin, quite the opposite. It's that they understand the risk Bitcoin hasn't addressed yet. So let me map out the 3 ways this scenario could now play out. The first scenario is that nothing gets fixed. Quantum becomes cryptographically relevant, exposed keys get cracked, and hundreds of billions in vulnerable wallets get drained while Satoshi's coins get dumped. Based on expert estimates compiled by Caprioli, the probability of this happening by 2030 is around 69%. And by 2032, this increases to 89%. This is the nightmare scenario, but it's not inevitable. The second scenario is that Bitcoin upgrades reactively. The community switches to quantum-safe signatures under pressure, which would require coordination across miners, nodes, exchanges, custodians, basically everyone. It probably involves a hard fork. Technically possible, but it would be slow, contentious, as it already is, and messy. The third scenario is early coordination. The community starts preparing now. Standards get agreed, and wallets migrate before there's a real urgency. When quantum matures, there's already a plan in place. This is really the only scenario that's structurally bullish because it removes the survivability discount and closes the risk premium, but it requires action that isn't happening yet. The real issue behind all of this is complacency. In decentralized systems, everyone assumes someone else will just fix the problem. There's no CEO, no board, and nobody that can force upgrades. Decentralization is usually a feature, but for systemic threats, it becomes a coordination liability. Delphi's research highlighted Bitcoin's governance resistance. In the last decade, there have been 2 major upgrades, the block size wars and Taproot. Both took years of debates and back and forth to actually ship. Now, think about what post-quantum migration would actually require. There are 25 million addresses with over $100 in them, and the network processes about 10 transactions per second. Just the migration alone, where everyone moves their coins to quantum-safe wallets and nothing else happens on the network, would take about 30 days minimum. If you want to do a test transfer first, that's 60 days. And organic traffic, that's 120 days. Add new hardware wallets, exchange implementations, testing, you're looking at 180 days minimum. And that's only after consensus is reached. The total timeline from consensus to safety is 2 to 3 years. And we're already inside the window where the upgrade timeline overlaps with the attack timeline. Justin Thaler from A16Z made a great point. The challenge is matching urgency to actual threats in decentralized systems. Banks can mandate upgrades, governments can force migration, Bitcoin has to coordinate through consensus, no emergency override. And historically, that process takes longer than we might have. Quantum isn't just a technical threat, it's a coordination problem. And right now, that coordination, frankly, isn't happening. Look, here's my take on all of this. Bitcoin is not dead, and quantum computing is not going to kill crypto tomorrow. If you're holding, this isn't necessarily a sell signal, but ignoring this risk won't end well either. It's just denial. Chris Wood didn't panic sell. He made a rational portfolio decision based on unresolved tail risk, which is exactly what institutions do. And until Bitcoin addresses this, the risk premium stays priced in. We need to stop assuming someone else will just magically fix this. Everyone needs to get together and make a decision, fund the research, debate the solutions, and build consensus before there's a true crisis. Nobody wants that. But without coordination ahead of time, that's where this goes.